Hi everyone, I'm happy to be here with you today. And today we are going to talk about the steps of emotional regulation. This is the first part. I'm going to cover the first three steps, and the goal of this video is to help you feel in control of your emotions in a way where you don't feel like you need to suppress them or ignore them. And also, I would like to take all the shame or self-blame that can come up with this topic out of the picture and explain why we engage in certain types of behaviors. So the first step that I find extremely helpful, and we always do, whether it's in my programs or one-on-one sessions with clients, is that I teach you how to map your nervous system state. And when we are not aware of our nervous system state, or when we are completely oblivious to how our body works and why we engage in certain types of behaviors, then we can look back at certain situations. Maybe it's an argument that you found yourself in, or a work situation where you overreacted, and then looking back, you think to yourself, that didn't even feel like me. It felt like something took over, and maybe you heard yourself raising your voice or saying something that you regretted later on. However, when you are in that situation, you find it really hard to de-escalate the conflict or to de-escalate the behavior that you start engaging in. And just understanding the different nervous system states and how they work takes all the shame and all the self-blame out of our understanding or out of how we feel in our body, because we start noticing how we react when we find ourselves in a specific nervous system state. And then mapping your nervous system states helps you to use the tools that are appropriate for that specific state, or that help you find your way back to safety and connection, where you can actually um, hear the other person's perspective. You can access your cognitive function like logic, reasoning. You can communicate, maybe sometimes even when you are negotiating your needs in a relationship, you can stay calm and you can still feel safe in your body and connected to the other person, which ultimately is um, from my point of view, the goal of emotional regulation. We want to still feel safe and connected to ourselves, first and foremost, and then to people around us, even as we are experiencing uncomfortable emotions. And then when we use the regulating tools or exercises, the goal is to find just 1% more safety every day. So for me, consistency over time and then integration of that safety into our body, or that emotional state of safety and support, and taking baby steps always trumps any big leaps or any aha moments without the integration that should always follow. Okay, so the second step then is to start noticing any sticky patterns. We want to start noticing our patterns of behavior over time, because what you will find is that most of our beliefs, or those core wounds, or in other words, those emotional pain points that we carry in our body and in our mind, those are in most cases deeply subconscious. That's why it feels like sometimes a part of me. Sometimes I call it the younger part of you, or if you heard about the inner child work, it can feel like this part of me sometimes shows up in situations that are emotional, or maybe for when it's when people are talking about subjects that are emotional personally to you, you can find yourself suddenly maybe shutting down or wanting to leave the room, leave the conversation. You can find yourself isolating and you just want to spend time with yourself because it doesn't feel safe to connect with other people while you are feeling what you are feeling. Maybe it's sadness, maybe it's the feeling of being left out or alone, maybe it's anger. So all those emotions that are more uncomfortable to feel if we haven't received appropriate support when we were growing up and dealing with those big emotions. So sometimes it can feel like a part of you takes over and you don't know what's going on. When you look back at that situation, you wish that you wouldn't have engaged in that behavior, or maybe you wouldn't have said what you said. And so, because these beliefs and those pain points are often deeply subconscious, it's easier for us to look at the patterns of behavior that we engage in. Maybe it's that every time you want to express your need, instead of expressing it calmly and assertively, you start crying. Or maybe it's that whenever your partner wants to discuss something that maybe he wants to give you or she wants to give you constructive feedback, you feel yourself shutting down and leaving the room. So when we start noticing these, what I call sticky places, or those patterns that are showing up over and over and over again, one of these patterns can also look like choosing people in relationships, whether it's work situations, partnership, friendship, maybe choosing people who are harsh and critical or who are not supportive. Um, and you notice that you choose the same type of person over and over again, and you want to understand why. So we want to look at those sticky patterns, and from there we can trace our core beliefs and ultimately reprogram them, or start giving ourselves a reparative experience when it comes to those pain points. Because just doing, let's say, nervous system regulation tools without addressing those deeply ingrained beliefs or patterns, uh, we will still find ourselves getting activated. You will maybe manage to come to a place of safety. However, later on you will find yourself revisiting that same pain point and engaging in the same pattern of behavior, because there is something deeper that we need to hold space for or process or address. Okay, and then the last step for today, the third one, is that we want to give ourselves time and space to process some of these things, or to process the emotions that are coming up when we are feeling emotionally flooded or overwhelmed. Um, so sometimes some of the tools can feel a little bit superficial. Some of the advice that you may come across can feel like you are just holding your breath, trying to, how they call it, like fake it till you make it. You can feel like that. And then there will come a point in time where all those suppressed emotions will just bubble up, and you will find yourself in that exact same place because those patterns of behavior haven't been properly healed and addressed. So I am not a fan of faking it till you make it, because to me it feels like we are putting the real problem aside and not addressing the root cause. So, for instance, when it comes to relationships, when you are choosing the same type of person, or when you are finding yourself triggered by the same things at work or in work situations, maybe you feel like you are not good enough, or you are not smart enough, or you are not being seen or acknowledged, and you feel that way day in and day out, and then you just start pretending like you don't feel that way. our body doesn't lie. If there is an area that feels painful and that feels like so for me, what I see happening is that when we don't go into those painful places and we don't address the issues at the core level, there we just create more rupture in the relationship that we have with ourselves. So how that can show up later on is that even though you are faking something till you make it, internally you can have the experience of loneliness, maybe sadness. Um, there is a lack of trust in yourself and a lack of trust in you having your own back, because the relationship with ourselves and our emotions is like any other relationship. If you had a friend who every time you if they felt sad and every time they felt sad you would just ignore that, or you would try to distract them, uh, ultimately, it's going to just lead to more isolation and resentment and frustration in that situation. So I just want to put it out there. If you are using some of maybe techniques or tools that just make it feel like you are really faking it, even, or pretending you are not feeling what you are feeling in the moment, it's not surprising if there is any build-up of resentment, frustration, isolation, loneliness, or even some um, more uncomfortable emotional states that I'm not going to go today into in depth. So what we actually want to do is we want to build a relationship with ourselves where no matter what comes up, no matter what emotion comes up, we have the capacity, and again, that capacity is built over time, but we are able and we have the capacity to be with what's going on in our body. And we don't freak out. We don't try to just like use a tool or use an affirmation or distract ourselves by some coping tools like scrolling on the phone or overeating. We don't need to do that because our body feels safe with us. Our body and that inner landscape that we have, all those parts of us that we carry internally in us, whether some of them are parts of us that have been hurt in childhood or part of us that feel like they are not good enough. All of that is welcomed because we are learning to create time and space to actually be with and to process what is going on in our body, or in other words, to be more accurate or specific here, we know how to create space for our body and that inner landscape to actually process it, because our body knows how to process certain emotions when we have the tools and the capacity to facilitate it. And so self-trust is built over time. That's why when you are feeling sad for the first time, and or to set it correctly, when you allow yourself to feel sad, maybe for the first time in your life, you don't reach out for your phone, you don't turn the TV on, you don't message a friend, but you just stay with yourself as you are feeling sad. That first time can feel overwhelming, especially if you don't have the right tools or support, which is really crucial because we don't want to jump into some of those uncomfortable emotions, even especially if we have been suppressing them for some time, because it's like um, jumping into a lake without knowing how to swim in it. So sometimes when there has been a build up of certain emotions, we want the no to we want the right tools, and we want to learn how to support ourselves in feeling them. And we are doing a lot of somatic work and And I also give you a lot of tools that help you with that in the sanctuary, for instance, which is a self-paced program for women, but I'm in there supporting you and answering your questions. So we really want to, first of all, learn to build the capacity to be with those uncomfortable emotions. And then we want to learn how to process them safely from a state of safety so that it doesn't feel like there is this wave of this emotion taking over and I don't know how to handle that or what to do with that. So when you are processing or you are doing any of this emotional work, emotional processing work, safety is what's the most important. And we want to give ourselves time and space to build that feeling of safety in us. Because anytime we are dealing with a heavier emotion or heavier experience, we always want to know that we will find our way back to safety. And that's when it starts to feel less scary to be with some of those emotions and to process them. And that's also when it's also when some of these coping tools will start melting away because we will feel like, okay, I don't need to distract myself. I don't need to uh, engage in some of the coping tools or strategies that I engaged in because I can trust myself that I can handle anything that comes up. And on the other side of that, I will come out feeling more connected to myself, and also I will have more space to understand other people and be curious about their experience without feeling uncomfortable when they are going through pain or sadness or hurt. Okay, and the last thing I will mention with this third step is that by tending to those what we tend to call negative emotions, I like to call them just more maybe uncomfortable emotions, because objectively speaking, sadness will be more uncomfortable for us to experience than, let's say, joy or happiness. But knowing how to process those uncomfortable emotions actually creates more space for feeling more joy or feeling more safety or feeling more trust and more support. Yeah, so this was the third step from the first part, and I hope I will see you in the second part of this series.